I could hardly believe what I had just heard. Not guilty of all charges, those words still echoed in my mind as I walked out of the courthouse, feeling the cool, crisp air outside. After 2 months that felt like an eternity, there was finally an end to this nightmare. I stopped on the front steps and took a deep breath, trying to rid myself of the suffocating, dense atmosphere that had accompanied me throughout the trial. The weight that I had been carrying on my shoulders seemed to dissolve, albeit slowly. Finally, I was free. As I walked down the steps, scenes from the courtroom continued to replay in my head. I remembered the arrogant looks of Charlotte, the wife of businessman Donald Benson, and her lawyer, an insufferable and pompous man who tried to reduce me to a villain. He painted me as a manipulator, someone who would have used a secret treatment to get close to Donald and, in the end, ruined his health so that I could, what? Confiscate his fortune? Even though I knew it was all absurd, hearing these accusations and feeling the distrust around me was devastating. But the worst part was perhaps not the trial itself, but rather the way it all affected what I had or thought I had with Elton, my husband. Throughout the whole process, he seemed oblivious to what I was going through. I know, he always had a busy life, always involved in negotiations and unavoidable commitments. But seeing him simply absent, with no time to support me at a time when I needed it most. It was like discovering that I was married to a stranger. Deep down, I knew something had been wrong between us for some time. But until then, I always believed that the two of us would find a way to resolve it, to rekindle what we had. The truth is that Elton changed. He stopped looking me in the eye a long time ago. I tried to convince myself that it was just a phase, that things would get better. But now, after all this, after seeing him dodge it as if the trial were a minor inconvenience, I realized that something had broken between us. Something was left behind, and I wasn't sure how or if I would ever get back. As I walked down the street toward the waiting taxi, my mind was lost in a harrowing sequence of memories, everything that had led me to this trial, this exhausting battle for something I never did, but that had cost me almost everything. It all started when Donald Benson, an influential businessman and my patient at the clinic, made headlines, supposedly weakened by alternative treatments. Charlotte Benson, his wife, was quick to accuse me, claiming that I, a simple surgical nurse, was slowly poisoning her husband with medicinal herbs, the same herbs I used to calm him and help him sleep. I still remember the first time I suggested the infusions to Donald. He was so down, struggling with pain and anxiety, while Charlotte showed no interest in his suffering. Deep down, I think he just needed someone to listen to him, to be there for him. And I had known about these natural remedies since I was a child. My grandmother had used them for almost everything, and they always worked for me. So I thought, if I could ease Donald's insomnia and tension with something natural and safe, why not? There was nothing illicit about it, nothing that even deserved a reprimand. But Charlotte took advantage of this tiny opening to turn my care into an accusation of conspiracy, into a convoluted plan to control him and somehow take control of his inheritance. I, someone who had never wanted more than to do my job well, was thrown into a theater where I was portrayed as a villain thirsty for money and influence. Each session of the trial was a torment, while her lawyer spat out words like poisoning, manipulation, financial interest, as if I were capable of something so terrible. I had no idea how to defend what, for me, had always been a matter of empathy and care. Seeing Donald suffering, alone and anxious, hurt my soul, and the infusions were nothing more than a simple gesture, an almost instinctive act to ease that pain. I expected nothing in return. But to Charlotte, my empathy seemed like a ruse, something to make me look good, with ulterior motives. I was accused of violating medical ethics, of manipulating the patient and of putting his life at risk. But how could someone so deeply misrepresent an act of kindness? Where did she get this absurd idea that I wanted his money? Facing these accusations left me in pieces, but there I was, trying to prove that behind it all there was only one thing, a sincere desire to help. When I got home, still feeling the relief of my recent acquittal, the reception I received was surprisingly cold. Elton greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and my mother-in-law, Caroline, seemed more interested in saying the right things than in showing any genuine concern. She came over to me with a saccharine air and a look of false compassion, asking if I was okay and how my experience in court had been. It seemed more like callous curiosity than real concern. I tried to absorb every reaction, every calculated word, trying to understand where I really fit into the dynamic. It was then that Elton, almost casually, revealed that he had bought a summer house in the country, especially for me, as he put it, in a tone of apparent concern. I think it would be good for you to spend some time there, Joe, he suggested, with that distant, cold smile he seemed to have adopted lately. After everything you've been through, you need a quiet place to recover. I felt an uneasiness building inside me. Maybe to anyone else, the idea of a summer house might have seemed like a generous gift, a gesture of care. But knowing Elton as I did, or at least I thought I did, it seemed more like a ploy, a way to push me away. There was something odd about the way he and Caroline exchanged glances, almost as if they knew something I didn't. I should have been happy about the offer, but my discomfort only grew. And Caroline, with her flawless smile and a too gentle touch on my arm, added, "Yes, dear, it will be wonderful for you to breathe in the fresh country air, away from all this stress." The way she said, "all this stress," made me feel as if the trial had been an inconvenience to them, an unwanted distraction. That coldness struck me more than any accusation in court. It was as if I were alone, surrounded by familiar faces, but devoid of any warmth. I mumbled a thank you and pretended to be excited about the idea, trying to hide my growing distrust. After all, what else was I supposed to do? Elton had already made the decision for me. And in that moment, I realized that I might be about to uncover secrets even darker than the accusations that had brought me to court. The summer house was anything but the cozy retreat Elton and Caroline had promised. As soon as I arrived, I could tell something was wrong. The structure of the house was old and neglected, as if it had been forgotten for years. The garden was a tangled mess of weeds, and the interior smelled of dust and neglect. There was nothing about it that looked like a place where someone could recover. As I explored the rooms, trying to figure out what exactly Elton had bought for me, I came across a small, dusty box stored in the bedroom closet. My heart raced when I opened it and saw what it contained: photographs. Several photos, one after the other, of Elton with another woman, a woman I had never seen before. She was young, smiling, with full lips and eyes that sparkled in each image. In some of the photos, they were holding hands; in others, they were laughing together, as if sharing a secret that was only theirs. I didn't need any more proof, the betrayal was right there, stamped on the images. One of the photos had an inscription on the back, handwritten in a handwriting that I immediately recognized: Elton's. Roxana was the name he had written, with a small heart next to it, almost as a direct insult. My stomach turned when I read that name. Roxana. So this was her, the woman he had been seeing while I spent sleepless nights preparing to defend myself in court. As my mind was still spinning, trying to process it all, I noticed something strange: a set of papers tucked away at the bottom of the box. I pulled them out and began to read. The words, written in meticulous handwriting, chilled me to the bone. They were detailed documents and notes, instructions for arguing that I was mentally unstable and emotionally fragile. There were even suggestions for witnesses to be contacted, colleagues who could testify about my erratic behavior at work. And the signatures? Caroline and Elton. They were both behind this plan. They intended to brand me as an unbalanced, vulnerable woman incapable of taking care of herself, all so that Elton wouldn't lose anything in the divorce. The intent was clear: to destroy me, to silence me. To declare her mentally incompetent, one of the notes said, and to ensure that she could not argue. This was not just treason, it was a plot, a trap planned with cruel precision. I stood in the middle of that musty room, holding the evidence in my shaking hands. The pain of betrayal was suffocating, but with it came a burning fury. They had underestimated me. And in that moment, I promised myself that I would not go down without a fight. Hidden behind the curtain of a slightly open window, I watched my mother-in-law, Caroline, and Roxana, the woman I now knew was my mother-in-law's lover, Elton, talking in the gazebo at the back of the house. Their tones were low, but the intensity of the conspiracy was almost palpable, like an electric current. I held my breath, trying to catch every word. "We need to find a way to get her out of the way before Elton changes his mind," I heard Caroline say with an almost sadistic enthusiasm. I barely recognized the woman who had once pretended to be a mother figure in my life. Roxana responded with a soft but equally cruel laugh. "Everything is already set. One phone call, and Joanna will be declared incompetent. They'll think she's lost her mind." The ease with which she talked about destroying my life made my stomach turn. To them, I was just an obstacle, something to be removed so they could enjoy what, for me, had been years in the making. "Excellent," Caroline said with an icy smile. "And with her out of the way, Elton will have full control over the assets. This house, and everything else that would otherwise be divided up." Each word was a stab, but I knew I couldn't let myself be dominated by hatred or fear. At some point, I realized that my hand was clenched so tightly that my nails were digging into my skin. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my heart that was beating fast. It was clear to me, now more than ever, They planned to destroy me, to paint me as a woman out of control, a lunatic incapable of fighting for my rights or even my own dignity. But they had underestimated one thing, my strength. I came out of hiding with a plan already forming in my mind. Anger and betrayal still burned inside me, but I knew that if I wanted to win, I would need something more: calm, intelligence, and absolute control over my emotions. From now on, I would be another Joanna. The woman they had expected to see fall, the submissive and naive wife, would be the same one who would use this to my advantage. I would let them believe that I was fragile, that I was recovering from the trauma of the trial, while in reality I was preparing myself. I knew I had to move slowly, watch their every move, and always be one step ahead. And as painful as it was, I would act as if I didn't know anything, smile when necessary, and play my role as a devoted and obedient wife. They would have no idea they were putting themselves directly in the line of fire. Did they want to silence me, destroy me? Let them try. In the midst of my careful strategy, while I was still maintaining the charade of a dutiful and slightly fragile wife, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and, to my surprise, it was Donald Benson. There was a mixture of relief and uncertainty when I answered. I wasn't sure what to expect from someone who had also faced Charlotte's accusations. "Joanna, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he began, his voice carrying a seriousness that immediately caught my attention. "I've learned a few things, and I feel I owe you more than just an apology." I tried to remain calm, responding neutrally. "Of course, Donald. What do you mean?" There was a pause before he continued. "Charlotte. I've suspected her for some time. After the trial, she seemed more interested in my fortune than my health." The sincerity in his voice was cutting, and the disdain he felt for his wife was clear. "She manipulated this whole situation to frame you, and now that I see her true intentions, I can't just sit back and say nothing." A small spark of hope sparked in me. "So, do you believe me?" I asked, almost not wanting to admit how much the question meant. "Yes, Joanna. I do. And not only that, I want to help you. I know how subtle this plot seems, but I know Charlotte wouldn't act alone. Something more is going on, and I intend to expose it all in court." He paused, and I could hear the determination in his voice. "I'm going to testify on your behalf, to tell you how you helped me, and how Charlotte seemed motivated by a dark agenda from the beginning." I could hardly believe it. After months of isolation and betrayal, someone was finally willing to stand by me. Gratitude was quickly replaced by renewed confidence. I was not alone. In Donald, I had an ally who knew Charlotte intimately and knew how manipulative she could be. Soon, others began to rally to my cause. Martin, the local farmer I had helped after his accident, also offered his support. "These guys, like your husband and your mother-in-law, think they can walk all over people and get away with it. But I know you, Joanna. I know you are someone who cares and who doesn't deserve this. If you need any help, I'm here." His words touched me. Martin, with his simplicity and honesty, had become an unexpected ally, someone who saw my truth without the masks I had put on him. My husband and mother-in-law insisted on standing up for me. Gradually, other residents who had previously treated me with a certain reserve began to support me as well. They were ordinary, hard-working people who valued dignity and justice, and now they were rallying to support me. It was as if a safety net was being woven around me, something solid and real in contrast to the cynicism and contempt I had felt in my own home. Elton and Caroline had planned to destroy me, but in the process they had awakened something greater, a desire for justice that was now not just mine. I felt that together we could fight for something much greater than my freedom. And with these allies by my side, I was ready to face whatever came. On the day of the new trial, my hands shook slightly as I waited for my name to be called. It wasn't fear, but a mix of adrenaline and anticipation. I knew what was at stake: my freedom, my reputation, and, most importantly, my dignity. I looked around and saw the faces of those who had come to support me: Donald, Benson, Martin, some of the villagers. Each of them was a reminder that I was not alone, that there were people who believed in me. When I walked into the courtroom and saw Elton, Charlotte, and those witnesses who had been planted to unsettle me, a wave of determination washed over me. There stood Charlotte, dressed in black and looking superior, sneering at me. Elton, beside her, wore a cold, calculating expression, as if this were just another business deal he hoped to resolve quickly. I took a deep breath. I had to stay calm and not let myself be shaken by those faces, by those attempts to turn me into a puppet in their hands. The first to testify was Donald. He spoke firmly about his treatment and how I had helped him find some comfort during nights of pain and anxiety. "Joanna is a professional with integrity. She would never use her knowledge to harm anyone. I can assure you that everything Charlotte has invented is pure manipulation." Her words were like a bomb, a bridge that connected me to the truth I carried. Next it was Martin, the farmer's turn. He stood up and, with simplicity and sincerity, told me how I had come to his rescue, how he would never believe I could harm anyone. This woman here helped me survive. If anyone here is a victim of manipulation, it is her, he said with conviction, giving Elton a steady look. Slowly, as Charlotte's manipulated witnesses tried to smear me, the confidence my allies had shown seemed to begin to crack their story. My lawyer asked pointed questions, undermining their distorted arguments and turning their own strategy against them. I sensed, for the first time, that they were wavering, that their hold on me was slipping. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and, as clearly as I could muster, told them everything. I spoke about the summer house, the photographs I had found, the conversations between Caroline and Roxana that revealed the plan to paint me as an unstable woman, and how it was all just a vile attempt to seize my assets. I kept my eyes fixed on the judge, knowing that every word I said was a piece of the puzzle. Finally, after hours of testimony and counterarguments, the judge stood up and began to deliver the verdict. The silence in the courtroom was total, and I held my breath as he spoke. In light of the evidence and testimony presented, this court finds Joanna Campbell not guilty of all charges. In addition, the court orders Mr. Elton Campbell to pay Mrs. Campbell compensation for moral damages and prohibits any form of contact with her for the next 5 years. I let out the breath I had been holding, feeling a relief I never thought I would experience again. I had won. Not just the trial, but the battle for my identity, for my dignity, for everything Elton and Charlotte had tried to take from me. As I left the courthouse, I was greeted with hugs from Donald, Martin, and the others who had come to support me. The feeling of being surrounded by people who genuinely cared brought me an unexpected peace. I knew the struggle had been hard, but I also knew that after that day, I was finally free. The days after the trial felt like a gentle breeze that refreshed my soul. It was strange, but for the first time in months, I could breathe freely, without the constant weight of distrust, betrayal, and pain. Returning to the village, with its quiet sounds and simple people, brought me a peace I had barely remembered existed. In that small village, where I had once been a stranger, I now found a new community, a home. The support I received there was more valuable than anything else. Than any victory in court, because it wasn't just about proving my innocence, it was about finding a place where I truly belonged. Martin and his son, Marcus, were always there, ready to help me and remind me that there was still love and kindness in the world. Marcus followed me around the house, always curious, always asking questions, and I slowly realized that this little boy saw me with a tenderness that warmed my heart. He spoke of his father with such pride, describing how hard Martin worked on the farm, how he cared for everything with dedication. It was obvious how much he loved him, and over time, I began to see Martin in a different, deeper way, too. One golden afternoon, as we walked through the fields after a long day of work, Martin took my hand. I looked at him in surprise, and he smiled, with that calm, sincere way that only he had. "Joanna," he began, hesitantly, but with a seriousness that touched me deeply, "I don't know how to say this, but, you have brought light into my life and into the life of my son. I would like to spend all my days by your side, if you would allow me." Those words were like a balm that finally sealed all the wounds of the past. I felt my eyes fill with tears of gratitude and happiness. Martin was everything I never knew I needed: his kindness, his silent strength, the way he accepted me without reservations, welcoming me even after all the storms I had been through. He made me believe again in love, in care, in true companionship. I accepted his request, not in a hurry, but with the certainty of someone who had finally found peace. In the months that followed, we built our life together. We shared every moment with affection and complicity, and Marcus became a son to me, filling every corner of that house that had previously seemed too empty with joy and purpose. Life in the village was simple, but I would never trade that simplicity for any luxury or comfort in the city. There, I found not only a home, but a meaning, a reason to wake up every morning with a light and grateful heart. Martin and I dreamed of the future, of the projects we would develop for the village and for the people who had helped us so much. And so, each day unfolded as a gift, reminding me that no matter how hard life can be, there is always a new beginning waiting for us, if we have the courage to embrace it.